All right. Hello, everyone. It is 7 o'clock, so we can start kicking things off. Welcome to our webinar titled Moving Your Design Career to the Next Level, No Matter Where You Are Now. We are going to go around and do some introductions. So, I'm going to pass it off to Joseph Tilford, who's going to talk to us about the Scenic Designers Forum and what they're doing, and introduce some of their members to you.
I have to unmute to do that. Thanks, Bridgette. The Distinguished Scenic Designers Forum is a group of established designers who've gotten together for the purpose of sharing our accumulated knowledge with early career and mid-career designers who could profit from that knowledge. Basically, the idea is we're helping people to learn things in ways that might be easier than the hard way. So it's something we're willing to do. We do these kinds of things a couple of times a year. We do one-on-one mentoring, et cetera, et cetera. We're easy to work with, and our group basically says if you need something, just ask. You can sort of find most of us online, and if you can't find one of us online, another one of us will help you find that person. So if you need something, just ask. We've done a whole bunch of things, mentoring individual designers as well as group things like this. So I'm going to let our members who are here tonight introduce themselves by kicking it now to Mike Devine.
Hi, I'm Mike Devine. I'm I've been around for a while. I think I started working my first professional design show in 1965, and I've been chugging along ever since, doing theater and all manner of entertainment design. So if you've and I've also taught most of my life, and I'm really happy to be part of this group for sure.
All right, Todd.
I'm Todd Rosenthal. I'm a freelance set designer, and I teach at Northwestern University. And I just want to reiterate that we are really open to young designers reaching out to us, even after this forum. And I think that that's really important, that we are really willing to respond to your questions. And so please feel free to reach out, and you can get my email on my website. So thanks, Joe.
Yeah. Wilson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Wilson. I'm a set designer. I live in New York. I've been designing scenery for maybe 20 or so years now in New York. I'm also a board member of USA, our union. So if you have any questions about that, you can come to me about stuff like that.
Ralph.
Hi, I'm Ralph Funicello. Recently retired from San Diego State, so and just found out I'm emeritus, which
Congratulations.
whatever that means. And I started designing in about 1969, I think. And I live just north of San Diego in Encinitas, California. Again, I don't have a website, but you can find me on Facebook and other places to connect with me if you need me.
Okay, April.
Hi, everybody. My name is April Bartlett, and I am a set designer, art director, production designer, maker. I am the program head for Pace University's production and design program, and I am an active set designer in the community. I was the art director of the Today Show for 15 years, and that funded my love of doing new work off Broadway. So I did the high-end corporate television gigs, and then I was doing sort of the new work and getting my hands dirty. And so I do that kind of. I'm sort of the other side of things, and I would love to sort of talk about that. I think something about students that are coming to us and asking us questions. I think it's really wonderful to see all of us succeeding in many different ways. And I think that that's really important, that it doesn't have to be Broadway level design. And I sort of am bringing that to the table, is you've got to find a balance in all the different ways. So that's a little bit about me.
Regina.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Regina Garcia. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm coming to you from Chicago. I think this is my big year anniversary of practicing scenic design, 25, and very excited and always inspired by everybody's journey and finding their way and finding their people. So I'm excited to be here with you all this evening.
And Rachel.
Hey, I'm Rachel Hauck. I'm a set designer based in New York City, and I've been apparently doing it long enough to be called distinguished, which is quite shocking. And I'm very happy to be with you guys tonight.
All right. I think that's it. And we'll probably have some more people signing on late, but they'll miss the opening remarks
We
to
have a Scott too.
Scott Bradley.
Where's Scott?
I'm
Where's
here.
Scott? Oh, there he is.
He snuck in.
You signed on so quietly. I didn't even know you were here.
Always the shortest one in the stack.
You were stealthful.
Yeah. Okay. Introducing Scott.
Yeah, hello everybody. So nice to see some friendly and familiar faces. I realize I've been in this business a long time. Yeah, I live in New York. I've been doing this since I was about 15 years old. I decided I wanted to be a set designer and have pursued it ever since then. Have gone in a little bit of television and production design, and always came back to theater, and still have come back to it again after a short self-imposed retirement and recovery from a list of things. Glad to be here.
All right. Back to Bridgette, I think.
It comes back to me. So my name is Bridgette Dennett. I have been joking with Joe that I am the proxy for the person in their mid-career who's like looking to go to the next level. I started my career as a scenic artist, and I've been arting and designing for around 15 years or so. I'm currently an assistant professor of theater design at the University of Mary Washington, just south of DC, which is a lovely little area in Virginia. And I am here to kind of be your guys' stand-in so how do you move forward and break into new markets and, further your career when you're in the middle of it and it can be hard to see the path forward. I am also one of the 2 active commissioners for the Scene Design Commission at USITT, which, fun fact, I spot several former commissioners on this webinar right now, so I'm in good company. The Scenic Design Commission is basically the group of humans who programs content for conference, so you'll often hear me saying, what do you guys want to see for sessions and labs and general kind of fun things at conference each year? So if you have ideas, please get in touch with me. I would love to talk to you more. But for tonight, I will be your moderator through this. So how this is going to work is I have a kind of loose list of questions to get us going and keep us somewhat on a path moving forward. But this is really, really informal. So if you guys have questions or thoughts, there's 2 ways that you can engage. Either you can raise your hand and I'll try to do my best to see those little hand raises icons on Zoom, or I have my chat pulled up and I will try to, as seamlessly as I can, work your questions into what we're talking about as kind of follow-ups as we're going forth. So without further ado, so the first kind of question that we had was kind of starting off in that point where you're doing that first transition from design student to early professional. And I think it's interesting that we have a lot of people who are in this group who are both professors with students that they're sending into the world, as well as like actively working scenic designers at the highest level. So what do you guys currently advise your students when they're going to start their careers? Like, where's the kind of entry point that you send them off to? And is that different than when you did it? Because I know that now it's a whole different ballgame than it used to be back in the day.
Well, speaking for the old guys, because when I started out, there was this separation between uh, studying theater at a school and being in the profession, and it was like this enormous gulf between the two. And it didn't seem at the time that going to school was a great way to get yourself into the profession. I think it's completely changed now. I think going through higher education, grad school, et cetera, to become a designer is much, much more common than it was back in the 60s when I was getting started. So it's a different world now. What I would tell a student is, you know, look at who you admire and be brave and pick up the phone or send them an email and see if they'll talk with you. I mean, certainly all of us would. I mean, that's why we're part of this group. So I would say that the best thing for a young uh, uh, designer to do is, well, two things. One, keep working on becoming a better designer, better with your pencil, better with building models, et cetera, all the things we have to do. But also talk to designers a lot who are out there working or have been there or done that, and see if their perspectives can help you.
So part of what I'm curious about is like when they go in that transition from studying to doing. I know that what I had always been advised, and I feel like I was the renegade because I didn't do this, and I'm looking at the careers of people who did this, and they seem to have gotten the better gigs. But is it still like going to assist somebody is the best in into the industry, or is there a way to get in without that being the trajectory? Go for it, Ralph.
I'll speak to that. I mean, I think it's still a good way. Um, One has to be careful because what has developed now um, is many of the sort of leading designers, perhaps commercial designers, we might say, um, uh, employ a lot of associates and assistants. And I will just, wonderful lighting designer Philip Rosenberg was one of the top associate designers in lighting on Broadway. And he once contacted me, this is quite a while ago, and said, Ralph, I'm tired of being an associate. I want to design. And would you keep me in mind and recommend me if for projects? And I wrote back and said, well, rarely do I get to recommend the lighting designer. Surely you have a lot of contacts with all the people you work for. Won't someone throw you a bone? I mean, like a small show comes up and they don't really want to do it. He said, not really. He said, the reason why they employ me is so they can take every show that is offered. And so there's that danger. I would just put that out there. It's not always the case, and I'm sure it's not the case with everyone, even the people here who work and employ associates. So it's still a good way. I mean, if you don't know how to get a show on stage, on a Broadway stage, if you don't know how to do that, working in an office where that's what they do and everyone knows how to do that, that's a good way to learn that. But different things are required. In other words, if you're going to be someone's associate, you really need to have all of the skills and be up on all of the software and stay up on all of that all the time so that you really have that to offer, I think. And all of your model making skills and everything. That's very different than starting out just as a designer, where you might not need to do that necessarily. I would
So
always
what are you,
say, yeah, pardon, go ahead.
oh no, I was gonna say, so what are the ages that you're seeing doing that? Because I know that like where does grad school fit into this? Are you seeing people go straight from a BA or a BFA into assistantships, or is it something that you need to
Well,
have
I
those
can only
graduate school
speak to
level skill set?
one of my former students. This is, she graduated in 2001 or two. her name was Amanda Stevens and still is actually. And Amanda got a job. She first was an intern or an assistant designer, like in an internship at the Old Globe, then assisting the resident assistant. He left. She became the resident assistant and met all kinds of designers, some of whom probably are sitting here as well, back then, who did shows at the Globe. And eventually she wanted to go to New York, and she found the right opportunity and became first an assistant and then an associate, and is one of the major, was an associate on Hamilton and various other shows. And I think she's still doing that. I haven't been in touch with her. But so that's one way. I
You say
think
she had a BA or a BFA, or was she a grad student in your program?
MFA, an MFA.
MFA, okay.
And she had a lot of skills. She had really good skills. I think one thing is, where are you in the country? In other words, what city are you? Where did you go to school? Where do you want to live? Where's that? What's your choice on that? Because often, if you come out of a grad program in a medium-sized to large-sized city like San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, Boston, DC, where there are a lot of theaters, if you stay there, maybe you will start to get work at smaller theaters. You might be able to. Yeah, I mean, all of this work comes through contacts. I mean, someone may dispute me, but I think all of it is contacts, and most of it is contacts with directors.
Mhm.
So
Well, I think that's the important component. Is like, if you're a young designer, regardless of whether or not you want to work on Broadway, whatever, do you target venues or do you target directors? And I would love to hear other designers talk about that, because as a young designer, I didn't target venues, I targeted directors. So
Yeah,
I would love. Yeah.
it's changed because when I started out, the artistic director hired all the directors for a season, but also hired all the designers. And slowly but surely, it became artistic directors hiring the directors and asking the directors who they
Yeah,
wanted to work
yeah, and I also think that if you find a director with whom you have a really good working relationship, um, even if it's off Broadway, um, that relationship will grow and build and so forth. And that director will talk to other directors,
with. Mhm.
say, there's this person, and that's how it starts. It's not, you don't leap out of grad school fully formed, but when you leap out of grad school, you're going to get a break.
Well,
Somehow you're going to get a break.
can we
Be
actually
ready
go
for the
around
break.
to all the different people who are and say, what was your first break and how did you get it? What do you think? I mean, I think I would love to hear from all the other designers about what was their first break and what happened? What did you do? Was it luck? Was it something that you know, initiated?
Go for it, Ralph.
well, I mean, this is a long time ago, right? I had probably less experience than anyone on this Zoom. And I went to New York University School of the Arts. I got out. I got employed I got in the union and I got employed as an assistant on Broadway shows. But I had very, very few actual accomplished designs of my own. Miraculously, I got hired to go to ACT and design in San Francisco, one of the largest regional theaters in the country. And that was the start of my career. And that came through recommendations of faculty who recommended me to that organization. There was a woman who used to kind of go around the country looking for talented directors and designers. Her name was Edith Markson. And she recommended me to Bill Ball. He eventually interviewed me and they hired me to do 3 shows. I barely knew what I was doing. I mean, it was absolutely crazy. I knew how to do it. I knew how to draft. I knew how to build models really, really well. But why they hired me, I had no idea. And then from that, people saw my work and and this was the start of the regional theater movement too. So it went from there. But that's not a model that anyone can follow these days, I don't think.
Well, and it's funny because as you're talking, what I'm sitting here thinking about is I'm going to go ahead and throw out. So I keep seeing, Wilson, your designs come up through my Instagram feed all the time. And as you're talking about how to get those like conversations going with director, I feel like social media is kind of the invisible third party here because like your pictures really define how you're known. And so have you guys found that that's changed kind of getting those jobs nowadays?
I'll speak to that. Because people were talking about how they started moving to New York, and like I felt like every time I wrote a theater or a director, nothing would happen. But I would email designers that I wanted to assist, designers that I admired. One of them being Rachel. I assisted Rachel for a week or two, and I did. So I got my start by just basically assisting every single designer in New York for about a year. I landed on Santa Laquasto and we worked together for like 3 years. And that was, after grad school. And I would say that those 3 years working under those studios was basically a continuation of my education. Plus, I was getting paid. Plus, I was meeting people in New York and learning how to put a show together. It was, exactly what I needed. Simultaneously, I would be like designing small shows of my own. And eventually I was doing enough that I basically, quit assisting and became my own designer. And that is kind of a choice that you make for yourself. And you have to kind of like, like what Philip Rosenberg went through. It's it's something that no one is going to no one's going to ask you to be a designer full time. That's something that you have to kind of tell yourself that as a life choice, career choice that you make for yourself. And then going back to that point about like how, like the hustle of it, like meeting people and stuff like that, none, at least for me, none of it actually made a difference. The only thing that made a difference was my work, like just doing a show which led to another show. And so like my work is what got me to the next step, to the next show. And like Instagram is a nice way to, I mean, it literally is an app about putting out visual images out there. And what are we doing but putting out visual images into the world? So it's a very easy, free way to just put yourself out there. Okay, I've spoken enough.
Speaking of Wilson,
Yeah.
though, early on in your career, I remember seeing a wonderful set you did at the Globe in the small theater, and I asked who did this, and Robert Drake, who was the production manager at the time, said Wilson Chin said he's our go-to designer when we have impossible assignments, those impossible tasks. So that was your reputation, at least in San Diego, was they went to you because you could solve problems. They felt you could solve problems creatively and beautifully. And that, my God, what else do you need?
That's amazing. I didn't know that. Yeah, it's great to find, because your work speaks for itself. If you, one show will lead to another, and hopefully more and more people know you.
Yep.
So the next trajectory that we're targeting is okay, so you're starting to work and you're doing the what I call the $500 theater gig. Like your little storefront gigs where it's I have a shoestring budget and I'm going to make art and it's going to be lovely. How do you then transition? We talked about the assisting route, but what are other ways that you transition to bigger and better theaters? And it's easy to say word of mouth and building those relationships, but like what are some like practical kind of ways that you can go forth? And Regina, I think I saw your hand flash.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share with folks, and I think I'm taking cue from some of the um younger designers that I'm working with and I bump into, there is a trend and a movement now to be hyper local, right? That they're not necessarily moving quickly or find it sustainable to move quickly to New York, LA, Chicago, or anything like that. So folks have decided to remain hyper local and to make an investment in the community that hopefully will then invest back in their trajectory. And I think we're seeing that for a certain amount of success. I think people are finding their support, their community, the folks that see them for who they are. I would say that the first challenge for any early career person, and wherever they are, is to practice. Like folks have to see the work. And that is always a challenge because it comes with sometimes a favor or a gamble from a theater. But I think in combination of remaining visible online, remaining visible community-wise, supporting the community, attending events, not only panels but also opening night events, talks after the show. I think I've seen some beautiful connections being made, especially in this time where everybody's a little right hesitant and everybody's worried about what's going to happen to the theaters we love and the people we love that have jobs at those institutions that we follow and have grown under. I think there's nothing like investing first and foremost local, and of course practicing at the same time. Practice, practice. I think I was one of those folks that were part of a huge class. I do have an MFA, but my class was pretty huge, so I had to do the hustle over a lot of my colleagues. But slowly but surely, the name does get around at any level in terms of being loyal, of being dependable, and of course, your art, your craft, your work is going to grow the more you practice. So ultimately, the big shift for me, to answer your question, came with one person saying my name at the right time
Mm.
after I had been bombarding them with postcards and Christmas cards for several years. And I do appreciate, I do love, I see some folks in this phone call, in this Zoom that I love already, but like really saying, hello, how you doing? I'm doing this. I want to invite you to come see. That is often the best invitation. So I would say that I did the hustle for a while, and it just took one person to say, "Hey, I've been watching you for the last 3 years. Thank you for your card. I think it's time."
Mm.
And this was those of you that know Ron Himes in St. Louis, and this was also the other side of designers supporting designers and designers supporting each other. Wherever we're at, Chris Acebo saying, "Come over." So that's how it happened to me. I was definitely did not, interestingly enough, did not have the portfolio that my colleagues had, did not have the years of experience because I was most definitely a late bloomer and came through visual arts. But what I did have was definitely that passion and that perhaps stubbornness that I was going to be a set designer, and I want to do that forever to this day. And that's all it takes. If maybe maybe people are shy, and I am the shyest person you'll ever meet. Yes, I cry at every moment. I sympathy cry, sympathy throw up. I'm right there with you. Um, eh, just take the step. Take the step, and there are many roads to Rome, like they say, right? So there is the assistant route, there is the community route, there is the support yours, right? Support the people that you admire that are setting those guideposts for you along the way. Um, and so just take the leap.
I
I'm
love
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that you were saying that you were getting jobs because you sent Christmas cards.
I
Is
did.
that what you? I
I'm
love
sorry.
that because
I was that annoying
it's like
person.
community wrapped in kindness that just like kept your name
It
like
was the
in someone's
holidays, for
ear.
sure. For sure.
Amazing. Like, because you wouldn't think of that. You wouldn't think of like that idea of like, I remembered you, so I'm sending you this Christmas card
That's
being the
great.
thing that gets
Absolutely.
you work.
I think it also came with an awareness because I have always been connected to folks that different theater companies, especially in New York and in the boroughs, in Queens and Brooklyn and the Bronx. And I know it's hard. And New Jersey. I know it's hard. This is non-for-profit theater is it's a gamble. It's a big, I mean, and we see it today, of course. So happy holidays, you know,
Yeah.
You know,
and thank you.
one thing I will interject here is that I think Wilson's really right. There comes a point in your life. I mean, and certainly in my young life, I was always artistic and such, and I kept there's this point where you have to say, I don't do that anymore. I'm going to be a designer from now on, and I'm going to take the hit that happens when I'm no longer painting as a scenic artist, or I'm no longer working as a production manager. I'm t I will no longer take those odd jobs in the theater. From now on, I'm going to design, and you lose money for a few years that way, but man, what happens is eventually people figure out that you're pretty good if you're pretty good. And you get a reputation for being meticulous and hardworking or thoughtful or whatever. And people find out and they end up calling you, and you have then the privilege of being able to be a designer.
April, I saw
Yeah,
your hand flash up for a bit. We'll go
thank you.
April and then
Yeah,
we'll go Rachel.
I'll jump in. We have this ongoing discussion often in my classes where when you come right out of school, whether it be with a BFA, a BA, or an MFA, you're not going to be the one in the room that knows all the answers. You're not going to be the best in the room. You're actually probably not going to be good at what you do, but you can show up on time, you can be fun to work with, and you can make yourself needed. And if you can fill all of those other opportunities, then people are going to call you because they want to work with you. And you're going to learn to be good. So that's something that even if you're not the best in your class, even if you're not, doing the best work, if you show up on time and you are fun to work with, people will remember that. And you are always learning. We were always learning. So show up, be on time, be good to be around, and you will find your community. I always say too, Joe was making a really good point that like, look, one of my jokes is I don't ever want people to know that I can sew because when I was an assistant, you know how many pillows I made? I don't ever want to make a pillow again in my life. So when people come to me and they say, can you sew? My answer is no. And at some point, your resume has to stop, right? Like if you're a designer and you want to be a designer, if they ask you, can you paint? The answer is no. I mean, like, sure, we can all paint.
April,
But
are you calling me out on that one? I feel like that
Bridgette,
was personally pointed.
look, we can all do it, but at some point you have to take the leap. And yeah, you're going to close some doors, you're going to close some opportunities, but allowing that breath, allowing that space allows other doors to then open for you. And I think that that's the balance and risk that you have to be willing to take.
And let me interject one thing. The opportunity, if you're in the theater, if you're always there, if you're always working, you're always getting better, and opportunities will come your way just because of proximity.
I
Yeah, I'm
actually,
just
that makes me
curious.
think of somebody that I knew. Sorry, I'm going to really quick finish this on. Then
You're good.
I didn't see who it was who was saying that, so I don't know if it was April. But I had somebody that I worked with once who it's making me think of. They were ironically also a lighting designer, but Ralph's story earlier about the lighting designer who had assistants so that they didn't say no to things. But that was her strategy to getting started. She was like, I don't care how crappy I perceive that job as. I'm not going to say no if I can do it because it could form a relationship I wouldn't have already had. And also, how do I know that it's going to be crappy? I can't trust my first instinct. I need to see what the creative team is coming up with, and then like we'll make something interesting together. So I thought that was a really good, like, I'm costing myself by saying no.
Well, and another aspect of that, Bridget, I think is really important is, regardless of, budget or, circumstances or whatever, once you say yes to doing the show, do a great job, regardless of what the circumstances are, because, you never know who's going to see it.
I'm just extra curious so that the people that are watching this can know how many of us have a BFA or a BA in scenic design or the similar. Can we just show hands? How many of us have a BFA or a BA in scenic design? Okay. How many of us have an MFA in design of some kind? Okay. And those people that didn't go to get a master's degree, how did you feel like what risk did you take? What did you do to push through that next level? Because if you're getting a master's degree, you're getting it for the contacts. If you're thinking about getting a master's degree, the first thing you ask in that interview is where are your recent graduates going, right? But if you're not, like if you're not going to get, how do you make that step? Get the master's degree for the contacts. But like those of you that didn't, how did you make that leap?
Well, I came from a poor family. There was no money for college or anything like that. So I just went to work. And I was always artistic. So being in the theater and working and, being a carpenter, painting, etc., it all was pointing toward design, because that was where I knew I could fit. And, eventually it just became a life. But where did I go for contacts? I was always working in the theater, so I was always meeting people.
Yeah, I made a vow with myself. I left San Francisco State 2 classes shy of a degree because I wanted to go to New York. And I vowed that I would never take a job outside of theater. So I cleaned theaters and I cleaned pots and I swept and I did, all of that stuff and got to meet people along the way. And that led to me doing gopher work for Ed Whitstein at the time, who had designed the Fantastics and on and on and on, who knew Bill Rittman, who knew, and oh yeah, you use this guy and he's cheap. And, you just start building reputation. And concurrently, I began to do off Broadway stuff and then off Broadway stuff and then on and on and on. But it was all being in proximity and having this literally insane desire to work in New York City. I had been born there, but hadn't been back since I was 9 years old. So if you're around the theater, you're bound to stumble into people who say something to you, like, "Hey, have you heard about this shit? Blah blah blah." And then the penny drops and off you go.
I want to clean up a misunderstanding I may have engendered. I went to college. I just worked my way through, and I just didn't study design in college. It's just I got an education, but the education is not what led me to the theater.
Well, the 2 classes I had to take were state college requirements: fire prevention, health and safety, and mental hygiene. So you can understand why I left and went to New York.
Mental hygiene might have been useful.
What is mental hygiene? I feel like I'm going to open a rabbit trail with that one, but I've never
No,
heard that
That's a
term.
real
That's
rabbit hole to go
intriguing.
down. I don't know if we want to talk about mental hygiene.
Okay, no tangents. Rachel, I'm gonna say I did see your hand up earlier when we were talking about kind of that, like, how did you get started without an MFA?
Yeah. I mean, well, I probably should have gotten the NFA, right? But I didn't want
It
to.
seems like it worked out well for you.
It worked out. It worked out. It worked out. I mean, but I was a terrible, terrible student, and I didn't want to hear Ming tell me I needed more art school, which I surely needed more art school, just the famous thing he would say to the application. I did. So I went to UCLA. I got a BA in theater, not a BFA, but a BA. I have very little applicable proper training. And I made a choice quite young. One of the greatest classes I ever took was actually a sculpture class with
Mm.
Nancy Rubens, who's brilliant and who got me. She was so annoyed with me, but she got me to see things differently, and that was foundational and how it changed absolutely how I work. But I did a bunch of I mean, I was going to speak to those $500 shows too, right? Because they're everything. Because especially for me, I decided, I think probably quite foolishly in hindsight, that I didn't want to assist. I wanted to work. I wanted to become known as a designer. And I wanted to become known for making the kind of work I wanted to make. So there were a bunch of plays that I couldn't figure out how to design, and I shouldn't have designed, and I didn't design. But I found my way through. And I mean, my first big break was a bunch of people I went to undergrad with, and we made $100 worth of scenery. We did a bunch of plays. We made them in somebody's backyard. I mean, like that is the thing, right? And so you're learning those $500 shows, which come in all scales of $500.
Mhm.
They sometimes you have support, sometimes you don't have support, but there's so much to learn from them. And some of them is, I agree completely. Keep working, just keep working, be working. It becomes scary to start or restart if you are not working. But every level for me, the experience was every level of things I made. There was so much to learn: how to communicate with directors, how to work with actors. What do you make? What's important? What works? I felt so lucky in hindsight that I was in LA theater scene which very few people saw the shows that we made. It's not the most popular thing in town. And those shows where you make all those mistakes and you learn what does work and what doesn't work equally valuable, how to talk to a writer who's still working on something that's not done. How do you work with that writer? How do you work with those directors? And those relationships, for me, that was the break. Like, eventually somebody took me to my first regional gig out of town, and there I was, not knowing how to draft, not knowing what to do, sitting in the technical director's office, and every time they left the room, like looking at the other people's drawings that were on the desk. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a really backwards way in.
Mhm.
But there's so many ways in. That's the whole point. There's as many different routes to design as there are kinds of designers. So, there are a million days where I was like, God, I wish somebody taught me color theory. I really wish I knew the history of furniture. I really, it's a long list of self-taught and constantly being willing to be like, yeah, I don't know. Somebody tell me what it is you're talking about. But it's just a different route.
Rachel, the
That was
thing
my
is,
way.
when you teach yourself things like that, though, uh, we're probably the same in that way. You end up learning that you can learn things without anybody helping you.
Mhm.
You can just go
Well,
look it up and figure it out.
Yeah,
and also, you learn that you can turn to so many people for help.
Yeah.
and also, I think that regardless of how old you are, you should constantly be intellectually curious
Yeah.
Yeah.
and constantly learning, right? I'm still learning things every day. I mean,
Curiosity
I
is a
yeah,
big part of what we do.
100%.
I
Yeah,
think that's the thing that I took from my BA, and then I'll clam up. But that's the thing I took from my BA, is that I learned, I had to. My parents were so certain that they begged me not, get the liberal arts education. And at the time, I was like, just let me in the theater. I knew it's what I wanted to do. I knew it's where I wanted to be. But I left UCLA with an incredible education, kind of in spite of myself. So that when the time came that I did need to do what you're saying, Todd, and explore something new and find your way in, I kind of knew how to do that. And that training I'm incredibly grateful for.
Yeah,
Ralph.
There's an elephant in the room, however, which is, or on the Zoom, that which is a lot of people who go to school, who have graduated from college within, be it undergrad, grad, MFA, whatever, in the past 10, 15 years, have enormous debt that they need to deal with. Like, they
Mhm.
don't have the luxury that I had of a $75 a month apartment, and so I could just do what I wanted. I didn't have, and I had no debt. I had no college debt. So that's a really hard one. That's we can't solve. Um, I don't think, but I have enormous sympathy for people who can't just devote themselves because they have to find something, to some income immediately, whatever it might be. Uh, so and I've thought about that, like obviously teaching, and the school I taught at was cost nothing. I mean, it was very, very little, but even the living expenses of 3 years, that money has to come from somewhere.
Yep, we'll go Wilson and then April.
I would say, just at every stage of your life, you have to be really smart about money. If you can't afford grad school, don't go to grad school. I never say that everyone needs grad school, because you could learn just as much just from working and getting paid for your education rather than you paying them. And also, it's not just about education, it's about living. Like I've been living in a rent stabilized apartment for the last 20 years, and that has made like all the difference in the world. Like just knowing how much you need to make a month to survive is really, really important. Just being super smart about your finances and realistic will get you, it'll just be the thing that'll keep you going rather than quitting at some point.
Yeah, great.
April.
Yeah, and I am of the crowd that I went to an undergraduate institution that was private, and I paid for that all out of my own pocket. There was no help from parental units. And then I went to a master's program where I was lucky enough to get on a scholarship for most of that master's program. I knew that I wanted to teach, so I actually went right from undergrad to master's because I knew that I wanted to teach. Teaching was always in the cards. So I think if you want to teach, find a master's program that will pay you to be there. Go elsewhere, find that program that will facilitate your education while you work in the scene shop, while you TA for their undergrads, while and so find those programs that will pay you to be there while you get an MFA.
It is worth saying you are still going to walk out with some debt, because I went to one that had a tuition reimbursement and a stipend, and I still walked out with debt.
Yeah, look, me too. Yeah, I think Bridgette and I are the same. But this is when I say, like, look, my heart is in the theater. But when I got out of my master's program, I made my own opportunities by emailing folks. I luckily was doing some silly little television workshop at my master's program, and there were like 4 other professionals in the room, and we broke for lunch, and it was like my last semester or something, my 3rd year of grad, and I was like, hey, I've got my portfolio, do you want to come over here? And sure enough, like they were like, yeah, of course. They're like eating pizza and like drooling on my work. I didn't care. I was like, hey, can I meet you? And look, we hit it off. I didn't know what anybody else, the other students were doing. I don't know. They were like joking in the hallway. And I was like, you professional, come see my work, put pizza on my work. And they called me. So you have to learn to open your own doors. I did not come from money. My dad is a truck driver. There was no extra help, right? Like I am that person that if I'm on a union gig, yes, I can respect union crew. I absolutely understand how to work with that labor. If I am a non-union gig, you can absolutely understand I have a tool belt on, right? So I think that there's a balance, and you have to find it. The only way that I stayed afloat out of grad school is that I found a corporate gig. And that does not have to be in production. Mine happened. I got lucky because I made a contact in grad school. The production designer for Today's Show called me as I got out of grad. So I was lucky. They paid for my plane ticket to get to New York. I didn't have money for a plane ticket. And they said, we want you to be part of our team. So here's a plane ticket. Just like totally lucky. But that's because I opened a door a year and a half prior. And then I followed up. I asked them constructive feedback on my work, and I facilitated those relationships. So open the doors for yourself. And it's okay. Look, like multiple times you're going to email out. Nobody's going to email you back. But know that it takes 50 times that you open a door for one to come back. And that could be a lasting relationship. The theater is a hard job, but something that I've heard in everybody's stories is we kept getting back up. And I think that's something that we all have to recognize, is that we do it because we're here, we tell stories for a living and we love it, not because it's pretty all the time. Right? So I think that's just something we all have to be aware of.
So next, okay, go for it, Regina.
Yeah, and I have two quick things to say, and I think the second will pivot to, I think for the conversation you also wanted to, I think some folks on the call want to talk about pivoting to design from other jobs and all that. I
Mm.
just want to say, first of all, in the spirit of what Rachel said earlier, um, sometimes I had access to the detritus of a show, right? Paint elevations, drafting, left behind, and all that. So I just want to say thank you to most of you. Like, I remember looking at Tilford's drawings and models and Scott's and Rachel for sure. Todd, I'm coming right behind you and I'm looking at your stuff. So thank you for modeling best practices for sure. I love
Regina,
you
it's the same
all.
way I did it. When I was working as
Totally. I find
a
you all very
carpenter helping
sexy.
build shows. I'd take the set designer's drawings home when the show opened and
Totally.
copy them, study them. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I find you all very sexy. And
Big right
the
away.
second thing that I was going to say, um, some of the um, some of the opportunities I've had also, of course, because now I'm somewhat typecast of the jobs that I'm getting. Um, eh, I feel comfortable for the community that I have, and I say, hey, next time this playwright comes through, I would love to be considered for that gig. Or, hey, I've been painting. My one of my friends was the scenic chart artist, and she was saying, I really would love to deal with this kind of landscape when it comes through. Like actually the context that you have, what could be the best way to reach out to them and say, hey, it's time for me to design for you, and I want to make that shift in my career. Um, I don't know how folks feel about that, but I feel, especially looking at most of the folks on this phone call, because I know a big chunk of you. Um, have you gotten to the theater you want to connect with? Have you gotten to the director or that playwright, that we all keep jouncing for, that has that kind of fabulous horror genre, what are the things that you want and what's the best way to connect? I would say always, of course, lean into community or lean into the community that you've built for yourself where you're at. And then go plus one, right?
I
Um,
want to throw out that, like, as the mid-career person, I want to respond to something you just said because you hit me where I am with the like reach out to the person that you want to work with because there's a director in DC that I want to work with, but I have this like weird imposter syndrome that's like, okay, I'm going to wait till my work is better. Okay, I'm going to wait till like next year. Next year I'll be at a place where I can
oh,
talk to
that's a
him.
great
Like
question.
I'm
Yes.
too little right now. Like I'm too little. I need to get bigger. And I think that your statement was really nice because like stop doing that to yourself.
Mhm.
You're crippling yourself.
We all get the imposter
Yeah,
syndrome.
yeah, Joe, you
Oh
can
yeah.
speak to that.
Yeah,
I know firsthand you can speak to that.
yeah, I mean, absolutely,
Eloquent.
absolutely. I remember, I I remember finally discovering that there was such a thing as the imposter syndrome and thinking, oh my fucking God, no wonder this is like real. And then just a few years ago, before he passed away, I mean, all you guys know who Eduardo Sicongo was. Just an elegant, wonderful designer and a good friend. And I remember Eduardo and I were sitting together one evening having a drink, and he said, I still have this imposter syndrome thing. And if you've ever seen any of Eduardo's drawings or his render, I mean, this guy's like the best of the best, but he still had this, I don't know if I have the right education. It's like, come on. You know what? The imposter syndrome is really real. It happens to a lot of people, and it happens because you have self-doubt. But the thing about self-doubt in my mind, is you can turn it into a tool. A little bit of self-doubt makes you work harder. So, forgive yourself for having it and go for what you want to go for.
Also, if you
Ralph, go for it.
realize that almost everyone thinks they're a fraud,
Yeah,
then like you're not, it's
exactly.
not just you. I mean, John Conklin was once giving a presentation of his work at a USITT conference, and in the question and answer, someone asked him, when do you get over that the feeling that you're not adequate or that your work is inadequate. And John said, I don't know, do you ever? and this was John
Yeah.
talking, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
one of the
Ralph, I was in Ming Cho Lee's apartment as a first year, and
yeah.
he was standing in front of some opera he was doing at the Met. He said, "Do you think that's any good?"
Well, exactly.
Yes.
And actually, Desmond Healy and I had that same conversation where,
Oh,
I mean, and Desmond Healy is there was never anybody any better, but
no, Desmond very specifically always felt
yeah,
that he was a fraud. I mean
yeah,
that he didn't know how to do all the things that everyone else knew how to do, so he had to make up his own way, and he made a career out of it.
yeah.
A lifetime career
And,
out of
and
that.
actually, if you find your own way, and we all do eventually. I mean, really, we all do find our own way of doing things. It becomes why you're hired. It really does because you have the way that you work. I mean, you get to a certain point, everybody's competent. Everybody can draft, draw, build models, paint. We can all do those things. And then it's how you think and how unusual your thinking is and how you can take that unusual thinking and make it into something that really works.
Can I add
April.
to that, Joe? Yeah, I think, look, I was John Conklin's staff assistant at Glimmerglass. And I think that's something that he would always say is he always said, let's see in the room. He was always present and he was always letting the show and the opera singers and the performers and the scenery speak to him. And he would always bring his most vulnerable self into the room, even if he wasn't the most prepared, even if his model was in a box, a shoebox under the table, he was always present. And I think that that's something with us as set designers is we're always thinking, oh my gosh, is this good enough? But if you can bring your most vulnerable self to be present in the room and respond to what's happening, then you can sort of know that you're bringing your best self to the table. And all of us are afraid, are we doing the right thing? Is that the right choice? Are we spending the money the right way? But if you can be open to that feedback, I think that's significant. There's one story I'll tell. I was doing Spring Awakening with the director once, and the director came to me and he said, April, the finale, there's something that's not right about it. And I was like, okay, well, think about it. And I spent the next 36 hours of tech every half an hour bringing a terrible idea to this director. They were awful. Like I was like, what about this? He'd be like, April, that's bad. I'd be like, okay, great, carry on. But sometimes you have to get the bad ones out to make space for the good one to come and know that like bad ideas are okay.
They're
I tell
totally
my
okay.
students you have to be willing to kill your children
Yes.
because you're going to
Yeah.
be very, very attached to your idea
Yeah.
and it needs to go. Like,
And
it's
also,
not working.
it's like if you spend a month on a really bad idea and you abandon it, that is not wasted time. You know what it isn't. And I think
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yep.
what I really admired about John Conklin was that when you walk into the theater, that's the beginning of another process, right?
Mhm.
And he had no qualms about saying, you know what? During dinner break, can we take that drop and turn it upside down? Can we add this? And I mean, he really was a master at that because it was like, as designers, there's only so much you can do to prepare yourself for what you're going to see in the theater. But ultimately, tech should be the beginning of another process where you take that production to the next level. And I thought that he was a master at that. I really admired him for that.
Speaking of the fraud, the syndrome. So for a good part of my career, I used old models that I had as a starting point. Like if I knew I was going to have a door, I wanted a door somewhere, I would go,
Conklin did that too.
yeah. And I always thought I was cheating. And I always thought I would get caught. Someone would recognize that piece of scenery actually was once in Othello at the Globe or whatever it might be.
Well, you
And
designed it.
I was so grateful. I mean, I was after John passed away. I really did a deep dive, and I watched about a 2-hour interview with John it's a YouTube. I couldn't recommend it more highly. It is astonishing of just getting into someone's mind. But he's talked about that was the way he worked, using his old models and pulling them apart and using pieces. And I thought, oh, it's okay. John does it. It's okay.
Well, remember Ghost of Versailles? He did at the Met. At one point, he was reaching into the model, and he was like, "That looks really cool." Sure enough, if you ever saw it, there was a giant hand.
Exactly.
So
But no,
there's actually a question in the chat that's kind of launching off of that, but it's a little bit of a tangent. But as we're in the world of digital models becoming so prevalent as technology progresses, like how's that kind of changed? Have you guys adopted the digital model? Do you still do the old school models? Has it changed your process? Do you have passionate feelings one way or another? Like how do you see kind of the relationship of OG physical models to the digital model?
I can talk to that very specifically because I've just uh, balanced the two, I think. I love nothing more than making a model and, out of cardboard. Yet my assistant, who's freshly out of undergrad school and does computer drafting and the 3D model, spin it around in the air. I don't even know what to call it, but that's what it does. And, just the ability to be able to zoom in and see what's going on very specifically to a fussy artistic director who wanted to make sure the worst seat house left could see through the scrim to the front door in this set that I did. And sure enough, by 4 inches, it was off. And they're like, you got to change that. So, without hesitation, I asked my assistant, I was like, okay, we need to shave 4 inches off of that opening just so this one seat can see in there very precisely. So you can't argue with that, at least of the specificity of computer drafting, but you can't do anything to replace the spontaneity and randomness that you come across doing stuff by hand, I think, and I will
Yeah,
never put my
no,
pencil down.
and I agree. And knowing your process very well, Scott, is one of the things that, and I 100% agree. Those computer models can be really helpful in terms of fine tuning a design. However, at looking at your like rough sketch models, they expect, because we both worked with Mary Zimmerman, they really invite the director into the process because
Mhm.
they very much don't feel finished. And I
Mhm.
find sometimes it's very hard to show a finished, 3D model to a director because they don't feel invited into the process. So again,
Mm.
I'd love to hear from other designers, especially the younger designers, on how they feel about that. So.
Yeah, Wilson, go.
I mean, it's all just tools. I remember, starting out in the industry, we were all still hand drafting and like FedExing drawings to people. These are all just like steps to like making the process faster and also like more, not just faster, but like we can adapt and make changes and the process it's a fuller process because we can do more in less time. I'm not saying that 3D renderings is the best way to design a show, but it is a tool that is super, super helpful. I myself have only used it recently because my associate just happens to have done it, like knows how to do it. And once I saw that she could just, like drafting a show can like make a rendering full on from the drafting, I was like, well, this is a tool. This is an incredible tool. I still make models with every show, but and I would say like, if we had started with models, maybe the show would have maybe been more and better, who knows. But it's all just tools.
You're totally right, and I learned it from one of my associates. I was like, I'm not really interested in computer 3D models. And when they showed it to me, I was like, well, maybe I should rethink that stance.
I will say
Because
if you're working on a job somewhere, like it's portable in a way that entire all of your model making supplies aren't. Like you can take like your whole big kit and like start soldering in a hotel room. Like so
It fits in a
the
cab too, a lot better.
it is, and
well,
also
it's
some
just your
theaters,
MacBook.
And then like the National Theatre in London, whenever you do a show there, they send you a video of a 3D model from every single seat.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I love
that's
that.
pretty
That's
amazing, hard to
intimidating.
contest that.
But
I,
and there's the different tools for different times of design. I mean, there's some tools that just help you discover the design, discover what you like in the lines or the bulk or whatever, and other tools that make sort of this more finished thing. And I see them all as just a box full of things that I'm picking the one I want because that's the one I think is going to get me in the next step. I don't see any of them being superior to others. It's just what's more comfortable or more inspiring to work with at that moment.
And you do make accidental discoveries with playing with shapes in space, with pieces in actual
yeah,
real
yeah,
life in a way that you can't accidentally do that in a model. It has to be
uh,
intentional in some form when you're drafting it.
yeah.
So,
I think that's true, and I think that again, I think that computers don't go outside the lines. I think the computer there's fewer times where there's a happy accident with the computer, and I just think and again, please contest me on this. I find that especially with young designers, documenting the ideas with the computer, but exploring the ideas by hand in an analog way. So,
yeah.
My observation from teaching has been that all of the SketchUp and various visualization programs have led to making designing a lot of scenery easier so that the projects are sometimes over designed because it's easy to do. Whereas if you had to sit down and cut out all that cardboard the night before it was due, you wouldn't, you'd edit a little, and so maybe that's one thing. Also, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but having the shell of a model box, of a theater, like the empty black thing, and a little scale figure standing there. I mean, you can place one dowel on that space in the right place, and you have a set.
Yeah.
I mean, you see the relationship of scale and space and everything, and I don't know that you could put that dowel in the right place in SketchUp.
yeah, you could also smash a light bulb into that model box and it'll do things that it wouldn't do in
Yeah.
SketchUp.
Yes, right. Yeah.
It's just
I
reaching
wanted
into the box and finding the right tool.
Well, because
That's right.
eventually that model in the model box is a three-dimensional physical thing made with physical things, which is what your scenery is going to be. It's not going to be an algorithm,
Right.
So
Well,
it also helps you through.
But it's also the same conversation we used to have about paint elevations, where it's like, why would you do paint elevations with Photoshop? Because that's you're painting with ink, as opposed to like we should hand paint our paint elevations. I remember that conversation happening when I was, when we transitioned from an analog process to a digital process.
yes.
Oh.
As a scenic artist, I used to say regularly, though, I would be limited by the painting ability of the designer. And if they couldn't paint wood well, I'm like, do you actually want me to put that on stage, or do you just want to find a picture of the wood you want me to copy?
Yes.
Because I could just copy the wood. So
I just
we had okay. I was gonna say Regina, and then we had a question hand from
Yes.
Anne.
Scott.
So
there is
Regina.
yeah, no, absolutely. I just wanted to say that usually for me, I want to talk about the play, so I go for the model. If I don't want to talk about the play, I send them a ground plan. I just want to say that first, because right, it's an invitation for collaboration and that dialogue. Exactly what Todd said earlier. It's about the conversation. Let's talk about scene 7. Let's talk about the finale. How does it all end? Right? Those are the specifics of the model, and that's the best time to go for it. But I would say as a professor, because there is an urgency to teach all this other software and tools, especially Revit. Since you mentioned Revit, Adam, in your in your comment and your question, I would say that right now within the university structure, I'm just trying to find all those classes that could be of service to my students now. And yes, I can catch up with some of it, but I'm also one person of a certain generation and a certain way of working. And until the university demands that I teach it, I will put them in contact with my colleagues that have a better sense, especially when we're dealing with some of the animation software in particular that is so fabulous. And they can go take that class. And
Yeah.
I welcome their flexibility, and it makes them more nimble in the job market, certainly.
I'm going to jump in really quick because I have a unique experience where I'm one of two scenic design faculties at my tiny college, which just feels like a luxury. But it's funny because Michael teaches Vectorworks and I teach AutoCAD. So I have students who get very into the what is the technology that we're teaching. And I'm like, forget the technology. You'll find one will work better for you. What's the drafting you're trying to do? Because you need to understand how to draft. And you can make the technology follow that, but you need to know how to draft.
And
So,
April's the
April,
expert on
you
that.
had your hand up.
Sure. Actually, I'll jump in right there. So,
Ah,
yeah, what do you want to draft? Are we drafting in AutoCAD? Are we drafting in Vectorworks? No, I would say, look, I look younger than I am, and I would always say hand drafting. I teach a 14-week hand drafting class to my undergrads, and I think that it is foundationally needed to move into that software. And look,
Yes.
I've known so
Yes,
many.
yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Yes. I've known so many set designers that only know how to do a ground plan in Vectorworks, but they cannot draw the curve. With their they couldn't for the life of them do a napkin sketch. But you have to know how to understand a singular blade of grass before you can design the field. And I think that it brings it down to this is a pencil. How do we draw the line? And why are we placing that line there? I think it goes down to even a model box. In a model box, again, Regina was saying, this is an invitation for collaboration, but it makes you simplify things to the essence of what we're really trying to do. And all of these are tools for communication and collaboration. And I think that
100%.
right, like I love myself a good
Totally
old
agree.
shitty white model box. Give me a shitty white model box that I can
But
bring
also,
to a
but
director meeting and let them reach in and move it around.
yeah, that hand-drawn line will never be done again. It's
That,
completely
yes,
original.
agreed. But look, this is when I
but when
say
you
too,
need to make changes,
yeah,
going back to the whole efficiency of what you're using, like there's a time and place for everything. Because if you need to make changes, it's so much easier to just
But yes, but I think you start with the
yeah.
hand drawing. At least that's a
I think you start with
foundational
the hand
skill.
drawing.
I think
Yeah.
it's
This
really important. And
and
ultimately, of
this
course, you need to put it
I
into CAD if you want. But if you want to move a show, you
Mike and
have
I
to
are
put it.
just saying,
and
with
this doesn't
pencil.
crash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Well,
sure.
and the one that too is in the back of my brain because so fun fact, the SED for one of our labs in the props slash scene design lab is going to be April's doing one on orthographic projections. And that's the one I really hit my students with. I'm like, what is your object in 3 dimensions? Because it doesn't exist flat on a page. So like learning to draw, but also how to change the orientation of the thing that you're looking at to really know what that thing is. But
Thanks for that shout out,
and you
Bridgette.
had your yeah, go I was gonna say go take that workshop, but I'm pretty sure we're all gonna send our students there. It'll be great. And you had your hand up a while ago. I don't know if we went away from your question or if we're still in the same ballpark.
Hi everybody. I'm Ann Clark. I'm a charge scenic artist. I've worked with several of you. I'm really super excited to see all of you. And I just want to say thank you all for sharing your knowledge and everything. I didn't really have a specific question, but I do work kind of on the side now. I've been starting to design for a local high school. And what I'm really finding interesting is that the kids that are in high school are like really, really super willing to work in theater. And like how as a professional designer, do you look back and see like what is the best way to kind of inspire them and get them to really be interested? Because the particular high school I'm working at is very, very low budget. They don't, and it's kind of like you buy your own supplies, you buy your own set and things like that. So how do you get those kids to be inspired when you're really just sort of teaching them crafts and just wanting them to work on it, you know?
And you're
Tell them
such
to
a good
follow Wilson
scenic
Chin on
artist. Just
Instagram.
show them pictures of the things you paint. My gosh.
Go for it, Ralph.
It's the magic. The magic. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? I mean, the first play I ever worked on was in high school. It was a play called Take Her, She's Mine. I've designed over 300 plays in my career. There's very few that live up to my memory of that show, right? I mean, because it was the first. It was the one. That it's, I mean, if you can inspire them of what the possibilities are and just how fabulous it is. Well, I mean,
show them how
magic.
far they can
So
go.
every aspect, every part of the theater is magic.
And go see theater.
The sense that you're working as part of a team, a family. You're all in this together to put together the final product. Make them feel valuable.
Yeah.
And as a group as well as individually.
Yeah. The other thing I would say that I would add to that is let them know that there's a career to be had. There's a living to be made doing this fascinating stuff. And how lucky we are to be able to do it.
And I'm going to say, give them
Scott
ownership. Give them ownership of things. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Like the students will be afraid to speak their mind. They don't think that they're good enough. But oftentimes, if you stand next to them and say, well, what do you think? And listen, invite them to the table. It doesn't matter if it's good. Invite them to the table. It will get good.
Yeah.
I will say I will second that, April, because I would say at some point after middle school, they're told that what they do is not good enough, including figure drawing and some of the other art classes, and then you have to fight that when you're trying to teach them some things. But invite them to, especially in those leadership positions, invite them to take ownership of what they're making. Let them lead. And I find the curiosity and the engagement just shifts drastically and almost immediately.
That's a great point, Regina. I really want to underline that because, the reason that we are artists is because we aspire to make these beautiful things. And when we start out, we're trying to be good, but we're not. But every day we get a little bit better if we keep working at it. I mean, the fact that we have taste and the fact that we want to make beautiful things is what makes us the artist. It's not our ability. Our ability will get there if we stick with it. But it's the fact that we have these aspirations that we can't quite live up to at the beginning is it's a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah. I'm going to pivot really quick, just looking at the time and where we are. I love Lindsay Webster's little heart that's just traveling along the screen. Zoom has so many fun tricks. The next question, like in my notes, was very like, how do you pivot into ballet and opera? But I want to also acknowledge that Adam was talking about finding jobs in the theme park industry. And then we have April, who's worked on the Today Show. So basically, we think of theater as this one path forward. But for all of those like aligned industries, how did you guys approach breaking from the traditional theater mold into opera, ballet, themed entertainment?
Themed entertainment, or Disney style or Universal style, is still about storytelling. So we come to those professions with a real advantage. We have been trained to respond to and analyze and create from stories. So in my experience, you use the same techniques that you suffered through in script analysis. You see what's the story they're trying to tell, what's the sequence that the story should unfold, and design accordingly. So it's not the number of collaborators, of course, increase exponentially. So you'll be dealing with architects and interior designers and lighting designers, of course, but the cast changes, but the process is very much the same.
Karen Manna says more sight lines. So my question is, we talked earlier about how if you're trying to further your design career, it's wooing the director and getting on their radar. What's the one-to-one analogy for if you're going to theme parks? Is it looking for posts on LinkedIn? Like where do you start to find work in themed entertainment?
There are like you can always look at like Imagineers, like the Disney Imagineers studios always has PA openings. So and if you sort of apply, you can be like, oh, hey, not only am I a PA, but if you get a job as a PA, you stand next to the art department and you say, I know how to draft.
Yeah, right.
I know how to paint. I understand
I love
scenic
that
art. You know,
Regina
like,
just drops a Disney careers link. You start here. I'm wondering because
it's
so I'm
true.
in Virginia and Busch Gardens and King's Dominion are not far from me, but I'm like, I thought about, I was like, I want to even know, like, is that just there's job posting somewhere to go apply, or do you have to meet the right person or like stand on the right ladder in the right room, or like what does that look like? So like go visit disneycareers.com is a good starting
Well,
point for Disney.
Disney has a student group. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a national group. It's like USITT, but it's for Disney Imagineering. Usually, and they're all university centered. So that's the place I would start. The object is to get your work seen, of course. But their demands are so specific. Are you an illustrator? Are you a production manager? So they're looking to fill slots as opposed to theater design, where it's a little less corporate, more collaborative, more integrated.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that there's a lot of links that are going into the chat right now. And I know that eventually I talked to Andrea about this is going to be hosted on YouTube. If we could just make a note to drop those links into the YouTube, I think that they'd be valuable if anybody revisited this because those are really useful.
Great idea.
So thank you guys who are kind of sharing your
also
areas.
if you're a set designer, you have the requisite skills to design theme parks. You have the requisite skills to design museum exhibitions. You really do. And I think that the learning curve is not that steep. And I think that if you're a good visual storyteller, you will be successful in those avenues. I also have to say there's tons of former Disney Imagineers, and that's for a reason. So just I want to put that out there.
Yeah.
Having worked for Disney, I just want to say that it's like I wouldn't look at that as the pinnacle of design. Anyway.
No,
it's very corporate.
As far as opera and ballet, I think we all, I assume, all know theater, right? We know plays, we know how all that works. You need to find out the same thing with opera and ballet. I mean, in other words, you have to go to the opera, you have to go see ballets, you have to learn about it to really be able to, design for it. It's a lot of the same process, but the material has different requirements and different things. I mean, in the opera world, people who work in opera and artistic directors and directors, I mean, like the history of the world is opera to them. Like they don't talk about the 17th century; they will talk about an opera that was written in the 17th century. So that's you need to find all that out so that because when they start. You can fake it a little bit, but you have to kind of know it. And the good part, I don't design in ballet, so I have no clue about this, but I do know that in opera, the money is about twice as much. As far as the fees, I mean, it's very, very good. And so what someone was once,
I'm not so
Someone,
sure it's very, very good. It's better than theater, but I'm not sure it's very, very
yeah,
good. It's
well,
yeah,
but
okay.
someone once said the reason for that is that no one ever did it for free. Going back, in other words, opera was always patronized.
Yeah, yeah,
And the theater wasn't necessarily that same thing in its history, but opera companies this, I mean, just know the singers get paid by the day, right? They get
yeah, yeah.
paid but per performance. So that says something, like to me, about the way it is viewed by the people who fund it and put it together. So it's so it is one of the lucrative aspects of what we do, to apply yourself to that. Um, a regional opera, I would guess, would pay better than regional theater
Oh yeah,
generally.
yeah. And the same thing for ballet when you start to get to the larger ones. I mean, I mean, I I mean, I've done a fair amount of ballet, and once you get up to it's like, okay, we're producing this new ballet, and we've got a $4 million budget. It's like, well, okay, you're going to have some scenery, son of a gun, and you're going to have a decent fee. But you don't start there. You start by meeting a choreographer who's running a little local dance
Well,
company
yes, very
and
much so.
working your way up. I mean, that's what I did when I was young, and eventually, I designed a few ballets for um, Susan Jaffe and folks like that. I mean, it's just like, it happens. And it happens because, you know, you gravitate toward it because there's something about that part of the entertainment industry that resonates with you. It's like if something about themed entertainment resonates with you, you'll get there because people can kind of feel the fact that you just love it.
I have a really good question. So we're entering the Q&A segment of the evening. So if you guys have questions popping up, just feel free to throw them in or wave your hand
Yeah,
around. But
just
Eric's asking, how many of you have agents, and when do you think is a good time to think about getting an agent?
Well, I think that and that someone else can I think the first time I got an agent was when the show had commercial possibilities. And if you think about it, you're going to give your agent 10% of what you make. So can your agent get you 10% more than what you're expecting to get from, like, say, a theater or from a producer, et cetera? In my personally, I've in terms of regional theaters, if an agent can get me more assistant money, I'll bring my agent into that process. But ultimately, I found that usually with regional theaters, the agent's not able to get you 10% more of a fee. But in terms of Broadway stuff, commercial stuff, I think an agent's really important because they can protect you and they
Yes.
can get
So
you more
is
money,
there,
and they can
it's
also
kind of
get you
a,
more points and better residuals. So sorry.
it's a cart and a horse issue, but like, is getting an agent something that can help your career go to the next level, or is it something that is for when you're known well enough that they will take you?
Agents don't get you work.
Okay.
Anymore.
Well,
They
it depends on your agent. Yeah, no, I think
Yeah,
that,
I
yeah.
mean, well, but you have to already be established for the agent to really be able to get you jobs, I think, by and large. I mean, but also, are you willing to give over 10% of every theater fee you get? Now, if you get to a certain point, and I assume what you're saying, Todd, is that you're able to say, "Oh no, I don't want to use you on this project," and you
No,
can
no,
get around.
I think you should have an agreement with your agent that if, like, for instance, if I'm working at a theater I've always worked at, I'm not going to get that person's not going to
Yeah,
get me 10% more. Why use them? So you should
right.
have
But
that. Yeah.
but you can do that because of your Todd Rosenthal, right? You can get that deal.
But I think, but
A lot
I
of
don't know
agents
though.
won't sign you if
Yeah.
unless they get
When
Is
I
10%
that
of
was
true?
everything.
younger, I did that. I tried to not use an agent on some frequented theaters, and they're like, "No, you have to give 10% to us because we're
Really?
studio."
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Oh, okay, that's good to know.
I've never
It's
used
definitely
an
not my
agent.
experience.
I've
What's
never
say that?
used an agent. I use a lawyer,
Oh,
Yeah.
for projects because
It is
they don't.
definitely not my, it is definitely not my current I've only had an agent for 4 years. So talk about Regina being a late bloomer. But I think it did come in handy in terms of handling the shift in finances and that cash flow. Super helpful. That's not my best my strong suit. But I will say that in that initial conversation, the agent knew already with some of my home theaters, and they said, if I know you're a company member here and here, whatever you do for them, um, you don't have to tell me. I'm cool. I know they are part of
Yeah.
your community. So we don't need the
Mhm.
10%. Just keep me posted for calendar reasons or whatever,
Right.
we're going after. But they were more informed about my work than I was of theirs and who they represented, which was very um refreshing. So I didn't have to convince them on anything.
Well, same with the
So my
union.
follow
In Chicago, we're allowed to take non-union jobs and not take union
Yes.
contracts
Anywhere
because,
in the
So
country.
yeah,
Todd
yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
went to my segue as my follow up to that is I feel like the other hand of that is when to go union and is it beneficial is always the thing I hear people talking about. And it really depends on where you live and what your goals are. But I feel like that's the other half of the agent conversation.
So
And then Adam, I did see your question, so I'm going to go to that next. But Ralph, go for it.
for the union, it's somewhat the same thing. You shouldn't join the union until you need to be in the union, until you're working at enough theaters that are like on a LORT level or that's what I would sort of say. But the other thing is the if you're teaching, some universities require union membership to
Right.
sort of prove your uh, worth.
Oh,
So
really? I didn't know that. Huh.
yeah, some schools see it as a credential.
Didn't know.
Absolutely.
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Well, that depends on if you're in an R1 or if you're at a like tiny little like PUI
Well,
like I am.
I think that the biggest benefits of the union are number one, the pension.
yes,
And
Yes.
as soon as you can
Yes.
become invested in the pension, it is a great thing. It's very rare. It's an anomaly, right? Like everybody's abandoning pensions, but we still have a pension. It's very healthy. It's very well maintained. That's
Mhm.
very important. And also in terms of having a standard union contract
Mhm.
offers you a lot of protection. But
It's
yeah,
a
I think Ralph is 100% correct. You should join when you need to join. So,
it's a very I
Rachel,
mean
I
I
saw
would
your
of
hand.
course
but
yeah
you
yeah
won't be
yeah
able to join until you need to join. In other words, you will not pass the
no,
test.
but
Is
They've
really
loosened that. It's easier
that's
than it
not true
used to
anymore.
be.
It's way easier.
Yeah.
It's not that. Yeah,
oh no, it's either
Post
no
COVID,
no.
they've
But
opened the doors.
what I mean is there's no test. The test is what your work is and where it is happening. And if you're not working at a certain level, the exam committee, at least in LA, when I was on it, we would
and
say,
it's not like
like,
that
don't
anymore. It's not
bother.
like that anymore. Not like that anymore. They pretty much accept.
Rachel, you were gonna say?
yeah yeah well, I would just offer there's another I mean first of all I would always defer to Wilson on this who is on the current elected leadership
Yes, exactly.
but having spent a little time there and gotten involved in working on some of these contracts right like there's an enormous benefit to the union and especially to those union contracts which protect you in unbelievable ways the liability the personal protections right like every single one of those contracts very carefully states in many, many, many protections. That cover sheet is the cover sheet for a 20 to 40 page contract, depending what it is. That's very careful list of protections. To me, there are two that are the most important. One is we are responsible for how it looks, right? And if it's not, we are not responsible for how it's constructed. And if anybody is concerned about whether or not it's safe, we will change it until everybody feels it's a safe design. That's essential, both as a concept and as a truth. And the other is, all of the pension and welfare stuff, all of these contributions above and beyond the fee that are going towards health insurance and towards your pension and all the stuff that Todd was talking about. All of those things are key. And having that, the union is only as successful as its members, which is why, so many of us have done some work on various degrees in writing contracts, working on contracts, being part of the leadership of it in various phases. And it's, I joined it when I was quite young, and it's helped me always. So I would lobby for it.
Yeah, 100%. And also, people need to realize that you get a rider with most of your contracts. And if there's anything in that rider that detracts from the standard union agreement or adds more work for the designer, it's null and void instantly.
Yeah.
That's really
That's
important.
But the other thing to realize too, in just like the discussion about agents, is realize that with some exceptions, like in if you're a scenic artist in New York City, there's a list, and you put your name on the list. And if people are looking for scenic artists, they might contact the union and see who's on the list, and you might get work that way. But we are not like, it's not like On the Waterfront, the movie where the union controls and gets you the work. The union doesn't get you the work as a designer, and so there's that's just not, that isn't part of the union's. We're not a hiring whole union.
And so,
for
since we
designers.
have Wilson here, let's go
Yes.
ahead and ask,
Yeah.
what is the current, because I know it's changed recently in the past few years, what's the current process for joining the union look like, and what point in your career should you explore that?
Well, you go on the website, and there are many avenues to joining the union. You can test in, which is the more affordable way to do it. Then you could also there's professional membership, which is basically buying your way in, whether it's your company or the production you're working on is paying you in, or you just pay it yourself and forego having to go through the test. There's also like getting in through working. Rachel, do you know about that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of different ways to get in through working, both as a design member candidate, and then once you've worked past a certain point. But all of those specs are changing, aren't they? Aren't they rewriting to
And what are the current costs? Do you know what the current fees are to
dropping?
get in the union?
I don't. But
I think it's much less than it was just a few years ago.
It's way less. I know. Yeah,
which is good.
There's a big committee that's been in action for a couple of years now that's been looking to make access to the union more achievable at all levels. So both financially and
Well, thank you everybody who's been involved in that, because that really is tremendous service to our profession.
And I didn't mean for anyone to think that I was not in favor of union or didn't value the union. I just meant that people shouldn't say, I need to join the union because I want to be a professional designer.
No, that's
I think you
100%.
need to become a professional designer. Then when you are a professional designer, you join the union.
Yeah, you got to know how to do the job. You got to know how to do the job.
I'll also say that you don't need to join the union just to become a designer. If you are an assistant designer and are consistently getting off-Broadway contracts, LORT contracts, these are all union contracts that you can get as an assistant. So, you can join the union just as an assistant.
It is relevant. There's a side conversation that's happening in the chat right now that's different depending on who you are and whether or not you are in the union. Heather asked where you can find the standard union contract more than just a single cover sheet. And as somebody who's not in the union, it says union members sign in to be able to see this. So you don't get to see those unless you're in the union.
No, you can reach out to one of us and we'll send it to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you can reach out to
there's a certain amount of that information, and you can access publicly whether or not you're in the union. This is true of the contracts and the memberships and all that stuff. And then there is, of course, a certain amount of information that is you need to be a member of the union to access.
But we can explain that and talk that through, what that means. And also, there's also something that a lot of people don't know is the medical reimbursement plan. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you are a member of the union and you have health insurance through your university, everything that is contributed to the health insurance through the union, you have access to that money. So if you don't use the union healthcare, all that money is still available to you. That's contributed in your name into the union fund. So.
Yeah.
So can you use that in lieu of dues or
No.
No. What you can do is
or
if you have money in your CAP account, which is called a CAP account, and you have some type of service or something that's not covered by standard healthcare, you send the receipt to the union, and they will reimburse you.
so it's like an HSA, like
It's like an additional health insurance
yeah,
program.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, like
it's
a health
pretty
savings
great.
account that we
It's
have.
great.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, and then when you get like Ralph or me and you've got the gold card, then that union pension comes in handy, doesn't it, Ralph? That
Oh
little,
yeah, but
oh yeah,
I've been
check every month.
collecting the pension for quite a while before the
Yeah.
gold.
Yeah.
But no, the gold card was just something I saw, and I thought, why not?
Yeah, right. Well, sure, it changes what dues you pay, doesn't it?
Well, but it does, I suppose. Yes.
It brings it down to zero, right?
That brings
I
it down
think
to
so.
zero.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But
But other questions? I think we're in this
So
Q&A.
Gretchen had a question about for anyone, and Regina answered this in the chat too with her bit of advice, but for anyone who moved to New York early in your career, what do you wish someone had told you about in those first few months?
I'll say, find your family, find the people that you talk to every day and hang out with every day, because those are the people who are going to, like not make you want to kill yourself. They're going to uplift you. They're going to be the people who like will help you find your next job or like invite you to see a show at least. Find your people.
Yeah, I would add, see everything and start to find the artists whose work you're interested in. And I would say, give it a year, right? Because 3 months in, you're going to be like, oh, this was a terrible mistake. It's so, New York is so singular and particular and weird and difficult, except for when it's amazing. And there's a lot, so just give it, if you're going to come, give it a year. And it's also not for everyone. So, it's totally fine either way.
Yeah, and I'm going to say people are like, oh my gosh, I go to New York City and I need things. I moved here with a backpack and a pillow. Like, if you can go, you can do anything here. Like, all you need is a place to sleep, and it slowly comes, it slowly happens. But like we were saying with design, you wake up every morning and you keep going. I think that's New York City for you.
A good pair of waterproof shoes.
That's true anywhere.
Yeah, but especially in New York.
And somebody who spent 10 years in Florida, also true in Florida. Awesome. Well, I think that we're winding down on questions. So, do you guys have any, on that note of like the parting words of wisdom, do you have like any final thoughts about advice to people who are navigating the next step of their career?
Let me
Joe?
underline what Todd said at the very beginning. When we say that you can contact any of us for help, advice, mentoring, etc., we really mean that. We formed this thing in order to be here for you. So if there's even if you're working on a design, you're struggling with part of it, and you just need somebody to look at it with you, that kind of thing is what we're here for. And we take that seriously. So if there's something that you need from any of us, let us know.
And I do apologize because I have one question that we went on a tangent and I didn't loop back to. So Adam's saying, many of you are professors. How do you balance your academic career with your professional career? And you're welcome, Adam.
I think many universities require you to maintain your professional career. It's called professional growth. And they actually, I know where I taught, you were actually given time off from teaching to do professional growth. So if you didn't do professional growth, then they would make you teach more classes. So it's built in
Yeah,
somewhat.
and it's crucial because you want to have teachers who have journeyed down the avenues that you're currently exploring, and I
Yeah.
think that's really important. And you want to have teachers who are bringing current practice into the classroom. And so there are universities that don't let their faculty members go out and work professionally because they have so many responsibilities. But there are universities like Northwestern and and San Diego State where they were like they encourage their teaching artists to go out and stay current and
Yeah.
to pursue yeah. And you know that, Joe. I mean, please,
Yeah, well, when I was
you
dean,
yeah.
not only did I require myself to maintain a freelance life, I required my faculty to do it, because the 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 work of being a professor, to be a professional at being a professor, you have to be involved in good teaching, good scholarship, and good service to the industry or the university. A good scholarship means if you're an artist, if you're teaching the art of design, it means you're practicing as a designer. The university has to allow it because they can't require it if they don't allow it. So you got to figure out a way to do it. It's important. Uh,
There,
I think it's a question. It's a balancing act. Absolutely, no doubt about it. But it's no different than a professor in, oh, I don't know, audiology who's running an audiology lab as well as teaching. I mean, these things are things that you just have to do as it's part of the profession.
a big shift happened at some point where, I mean, when I got out of even a BFA program, but there were people who were going to try to work professionally, and there were people who were going to go into academia, and it was a complete divide, and few did both.
Mhm.
Um, and in academia, in order to professional growth was considered publishing. And so if you were teaching theater or teaching theater design, you wrote yet another book on set design or drafting or model making or something. And there were many of them because people had to do that. They had to write a book. That was how they
Mhm.
had to prove that, for tenure, to get promotion. At some point, people started realizing, or universities started accepting actual design work and production work as professional growth, and you didn't have to write a book. I mean, I was joking when I first started teaching. People asked me what book I was going to write. And I said, I'm going to write a book on theater stories for non-professionals. In other words, if you were teaching in a university and had never worked professionally and you had no backlog of theater stories to tell in class, you could reference my book, right? And it would have all the great theater, all the great theater stories, but obviously that was a joke, and I never wrote that book. But the but that changed, as I say, sometime maybe in the 90s, in the early 90s, or maybe even before then, where universities, not just NYU, Yale, and Northwestern and Carnegie, but many universities started recognizing the fact that they needed to be hiring professional, not only designers but actors and directors and everyone to teach in their, to be able to attract students. They had to have professionals teaching
Yeah.
there.
I was kind of, I mean, luckily in my dual career, I was kind of on the front lines of that change. It really came about when universities saw that there was tuition income and prestige in having great fine arts departments. But in order to have
Mhm.
great fine arts departments in painting, sculpture, ballet, opera, theater, they really had to look at getting professionals in rather than people who were writing books. So what happened was a very fast transition to, instead of publish or perish, it was professional activity became the replacement for publishing, but only in certain fields, and it's worked out great. It really has, because
Yeah.
the quality of fine arts training in fine arts departments at major universities is head and shoulders above where it was, say, 45 years ago.
100%. And I do. Yeah. Go ahead, Ralph. Sorry.
No, you go.
No, I'm saying I do a lot of tenure reviews of faculty members who are up for promotion, and there's two that I do. One is if I 100% think that that person should be tenured or given promotion, and number two is I 100% think that person should be tenured, and I need to explain to that university that this person needs to have access to work outside, that
Yeah.
they can't design 5 shows on campus, prop everything, design everything, and the expectation is that they maintain a national profile. It's not possible. The university needs to give that candidate room to breathe and to allow them to go and work off campus and establish that national profile. And we can, as designers, decide that, hey, listen, I'm going to do all my shows in the summer, because that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think
and
the
yeah,
university,
yeah,
you
in
know what
my
I'm
And
talking about, Jeff.
Adam, you're in a similar boat to me. I teach at a smaller university, and our job is, like Todd was talking about earlier, with the universities don't want to give you the time away because what we do is a lot. I have a colleague who we just switched over. Our shop foreman retired, so we brought in a new one. And I was really impressed at when he did his interview. One of the things that he said is that I need to have it where I have the ability to improve my skill set and develop professionally. And he was explicit about that. So if you're not getting that from this is the scary part. If you're not getting that from your department chair, that's a conversation with your dean.
And just remember this phrase that you've got to use with your administration. They cannot require what they prevent. In other words, if they want you to be such a worker bee at the school that you can't work professionally, then when time comes for raises or tenure or something like that, they can't all of a sudden say you didn't do all this other
No,
stuff.
it's unreasonable. Yeah,
They
it's
just
completely
plain didn't
unreasonable.
let you
Also,
do it.
check your faculty handbook, because they probably have language about protections for professional activity. Because I just worked on the faculty handbook revision committee, and there is explicit language about allowances for conference attendance and the things that you do to develop your professional identity and being known in the field. And they can't allow those for chemistry, but not allow those for theater.
But also, some
Um,
universities will not recognize the work that you do on campus as professional work. They acknowledge it as service, and I think that's not. I think
Right.
that's
No,
unfair.
it's not
not
right at all,
fair.
because it's not
No.
like sitting in a committee room. It's not the same as service. What you're doing is you're practicing your profession at the school because the school wants you to practice it there. Yeah, here's the thing. Any of you who are young faculty members who are trying to put together this dual career or whatever, get a hold of me. I've written white papers for universities about this kind of shit. Get a hold of me. I'll straighten out your administration.
Well, and I love that you have the experience of being a dean as well as
Well,
a
that's right. And
designer. So
I can talk dean to dean and help them see how wrong they are.
Adam, you just found yourself a captain for that.
Yeah.
And
ship.
that's why
Adam,
we
get a hold
love
of me.
Joe. That's why we love Joe.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. This was fun. It was great to hear some of your guys' stories and such. And now I'm looking forward to Kat's the Jellicle ball
Yeah.
that's
And
sneakily
as,
sitting over Rachel's shoulder.
as long as our members are on the screen right now, you're going to be hearing from me soon about scheduling a meeting about this thing that Regina wrote to all of us about. I think we need to talk about that. It's something I think that's really important, and the more input we can get from all of our members, the better. I think it's something we need to work on.
Thank you all.
guys.
Thank you,
Just
Joe.
want to say, thank you for
Thank you,
everybody for
And
attending.
a
This
special
was really
Thank
great.
you all.
Yeah.
This
A
was
special
great.
thanks to
Thank you.
Hi,
Bridgette for being
Stephanie.
our moderator. Thank you very much, Bridgette.
You're very
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you.
Thanks thanks so much, you guys. Thanks for having us.
Great.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. It's great to see everybody.